In this video, I'm going to answer the question, what is congruent leadership? And also share with you a few ways that you can become a more congruent leader. So in this video, I'm going to first cover what is congruent leadership, and I'll share my personal definition that I've discovered over the years. And then I'll be sharing 4 hallmarks of congruent leadership. And these are 4 ways of being that congruent leaders fully embody and that you can practice to become a more congruent and effective leader. If you're anything like me, I'm guessing that you'd like to be a more effective leader. You'd like to be able to have people follow you, listen to you, do what you say. And what I've learned pretty much the hard way, like I've learned most of my lessons, is that leadership starts from the inside out. Before you can really lead other people, it's really fundamental to lead yourself. And that is really the foundation of congruent leadership. So this is my definition. This is not a textbook definition. This is what I've discovered. I've seen that leaders are more effective when they walk their talk. And that's really at the core of what makes a congruent leader. Congruent leader is someone who shows up in the world and speaks and lives the values that they hold, so that ultimately they are the embodiment of their own leadership. Meaning, a congruent leader is someone who does the things that they're asking other people to do. So I remember, for example, when I was coaching in the very beginning of my business, I will transparently share with you that I wasn't a very congruent leader. I was leading this organization, this event called the Women's Success Summit, and it was all about all these ways to be more successful, more powerful, more aligned, make more money. And in the meantime, while I was doing all that, inside I was really struggling with my relationships, with my business, with my health. And so the picture that I had on the outside, and it wasn't that I was trying to be inauthentic, but it was that I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to share what was really going on in my life. And as a result, I had a mask on. And so I wasn't a congruent leader. My belief is that my business was struggling back then because people could sense that. Even if maybe not consciously, I think that subconsciously people can sense when you're out of alignment with your own beliefs, with your own values, with your own statements. And so to be a congruent leader is to focus first from the inside out, focus on your integrity, living your values. But in my opinion, also being honest and transparent when you fall short. A lot of people think that leadership is about showing up perfectly and that you shouldn't show your foibles or flaws or mistakes or failures. And I absolutely don't believe that. What I believe is that people truly value honesty and authenticity, and that when you show up vulnerably and show that you're growing and learning, other people can then also grow and learn and admit when they're not being perfect also. So that's at the foundation of being a congruent leader. So let's talk next a little bit about how you can up-level your congruency as a leader. A couple more things before I get into the hallmarks of a congruent leader that you can use. And that is that congruent leadership works especially well because a leader is leading not because of a title or because people have to listen to them or because they are ruling by decree or dictates. The reason congruent leadership works is because the leader is walking the talk and people are watching. And people tend to do what you do, not so much what you say. If you've ever had a child, for example, or been around a child or been a child, then you know that if you say to a child to do one thing, but you are modeling something else, chances are the child is going to pick up on what you're modeling rather than what you're saying. And so one of the best things about congruent leadership is as you develop yourself into a more congruent leader, you become naturally more inspiring to others. Other people are more likely to be enrolled in what you're leading on, what you're talking about, what your vision is. And by them being more inspired, you get more inspired because you feel the impact of your leadership. And when you feel the impact of your leadership, it's motivating and it generates a desire to be even better and even more congruent and more aligned. And so this type of leadership really leads you on a virtuous cycle, a virtuous circle of upliftment for you and for the people that you're leading. Now, before I get into the hallmarks, one more thing, and that is that I have other videos on leadership. Congruent leadership is one type of leadership, but there are a lot of different ones, and I have a whole playlist for you to check out. I invite you to check it out after you've finished this video. So at the foundation of congruent leadership is the idea of living and breathing and walking the values. So all of the hallmarks that I'm going to share with you kind of come back to this idea that a congruent leader holds certain values, and I'm going to call these lofty values or desirable values or positive values. And in general, when I'm talking about leadership in all aspects, I'm talking about the kind of leadership that uplifts and inspires and makes the world a better place. So that out of the way, we're looking at these values being the center of congruent leadership. And the first hallmark is someone who lives those values with integrity. So when I use the word integrity, it's a little different sometimes than people might imagine. When I'm talking about integrity, I'm talking about it in the fundamental, truest sense of the word, meaning whole and complete. So integrity, think of a wheel, right? A wheel that has all its spokes and that is in a perfect circle is an integrity. It's whole and complete and perfect. Now, if we remove some spokes or hammered a dent into the wheel, it would no longer be in integrity. It's not whole and complete and perfect anymore. I'm talking about being in alignment or in congruency with that which is said or spoken or promised. So a congruent leader is someone who keeps their word. It's someone who lives and breathes the values that they claim. And an incongruent leader is the opposite. I'll give you a really good example of incongruent leadership recently, which was when the governor of California put everybody in the state under lockdown, kept them in lockdown, and then was discovered dining out at the French Laundry with a bunch of friends, no masks, all not socially distanced, right? So that's incongruent leadership. That's somebody who said something in the world and was witnessed in that statement, that declaration, and then was discovered not to be living what he had decreed for everyone else. So that's incongruent leadership. That's an example of not having integrity with one's own word. The second hallmark of congruent leadership is also having consistency. And so consistency is something that's highly trustable. When you show up on time, again and again, when you consistently lead with integrity, when you consistently walk the talk, it creates more trust. And people can look to you and know that they can rely on what you say and what you say you're going to do. Now, the opposite of that, of course, would be inconsistency. And that means like if you were to do it sometimes but not other times, people can't trust you then. And they're like, I wonder if she really means it this time. And when people can't trust, then they generally don't follow or they don't stick around. They might be brought on board initially by a fabulous vision and by beautiful words and promises, but if you're not consistently living those promises, then they probably aren't going to stick around. The third hallmark of a congruent leader is transparency. And when I say transparency, what I mean is someone who acknowledges when things are not perfect. It is 100,000% impossible for someone to be in perfect integrity and perfect congruence all of the time. And for that reason, then it is really important that when, as a leader, we're not in integrity, when something does break down, that we acknowledge it, that we face it, that we handle it truthfully and honestly and even vulnerably. A lot of times, I've mentioned this earlier, leaders have this belief that they have to be perfect and keep this perfect facade up in order for people to respect them and trust them, and that they can't make mistakes or they can't be seen making mistakes. And so what ends up happening with that belief is that they might hide their mistakes, and then it's so much worse when they're found out. And so I bring this to you because in politics, this happens all the time. All the time we see when our politicians, our leaders, they make mistakes, they break down, they fall, they stumble, they fumble, and then they hide it. And so often I find out about this and I'm thinking the original mistake, it would have been so much easier if they just admitted it, if they had just acknowledged it, if they'd just been transparent about it, if they had been the one to bring it up on their terms rather than having it be discovered through their text messages or something like that. And so transparency really supports the congruent leader. The fourth item is that a congruent leader also receives leadership. And the reason for that is that if someone is being congruent as a leader, right, and they want other people to be enrolled in their vision, they want other people to join them, other people to support them, follow them, whatever, then it's really important that they also be someone who is listening, who is receiving information, and actually who's being also coached or led. It is my opinion that every single human, every single leader, every person, no matter how great they are, will benefit from leadership as well, will benefit from both giving leadership and receiving leadership. And so a congruent leader is expected to deliver leadership. I believe a congruent leader is also someone who is receiving leadership and understands how to grow and evolve based on other people's perspectives and outside information. If you're someone who's looking to develop your leadership, especially in the area of business, then I highly recommend checking out my Superstar Business Alignment Assessment. This is a way that you can discover how you can step into greater leadership in your own business and in your own life. You can get that by clicking on the link below in the comments.